Okay, I have us right at 11:30 Eastern Time, so let's get started and stay on schedule this morning. Welcome. My name is Thomas Meredith. I am the Vice President of Marketing here for the RMI. On behalf of the Resource Management Institute, I would like to welcome you to our Power Up session today, 5 Ways Resource Management Brings Business Value. Our webcast today is scheduled for 30 minutes, so I'll cover a few quick items at the beginning before we get started. We have loaded a PDF copy of today's presentation deck in the handouts window of your GoToWebinar panel, so feel free to download that if you would like. And we are recording the webcast as well. We'll be sending out an email with a link to the recording later this afternoon. And even though we are scheduled for just 30 minutes, the presentation is short, so we will have time for a Q&A session at the end. So we won't stop the presentation, so if you hear something, just put your question in the questions window panel, and we'll get to those at the end. I'll help moderate that session. And with that, I think we're ready to get started, so let me get out of the way here and welcome the Managing Director of the Resource Management Institute, Randy Mislovic. Randy, welcome. I'll hand it off to you.
Great. Thank you, Thomas. And I'll do a quick sound check. Does that sound all right?
Sounds good.
Okay, perfect. Great. Thanks, Thomas, and welcome to our many attenders. We have, again, setting a new record for our Power Up attendance, and we're delighted so many people have chosen to join us. Hope we get value out of today's session called 5 Ways Resource Management Brings Business Value. So whether you're an RMO trying to justify needed investments, or you're a service delivery executive trying to understand more about how to, what to do and what you get as far as return from your investment and time in resource management, this session should bring hopefully some good value to you and information relative to how resource management brings business value. I certainly wanted to say thank you to our event sponsors today, Keyed In, MavenLink, and Upland, 3 vendors that provide solutions in the space for resource management and other service delivery needs, and we hope you'll take the time to check them out. We really appreciate their support of this broadcast today. So let me move right into a quick introduction to the RMI before I move into the 5 things I want to talk about today. If you're not familiar with us, we are an institute dedicated to the advancement of resource and workforce management thought leadership, and we do that in a number of ways. But if you're a project-based business, we help you with things like improving project performance, resource utilization, improving customer and employee satisfaction and retention, and we do that through better discipline in resource and workforce management. And we provide, and you'll see some examples as we go through our session today, of best practice definition to help with the RM discipline. And we've got world-class market research. We are the only institute doing a deep dive research on resource and workforce management. You'll find lots of good benchmark data as well as white papers available from our website. Of course, we provide training and education, in particular our certification program. And we run a variety of events, including this and our annual symposium and other events that we run throughout the year. If you haven't been to our website, I would encourage you to do that. The great news about the RMI is it's free to join. And so if you just go up and put the information we request, it's pretty quick. It gets you behind a firewall, and you have the best experience with the RMI site once you get behind the firewall. And with that, you'll find opportunities to collaborate with others in the RM community, including through events like this today at our annual symposium, or through our RM community tools. We've got a great forum tool out there that people are using to collaborate, ask questions, and work on different problems. To innovate through our market research, we have in providing insights on things that are working, things that are not working, what best practices are, and on other areas as it relates to that. And innovation through better tools. If you're an RMI, RMCP student, a graduate, you get access to a special toolkit. And then last I'll mention is education is provided through our certification class, as well as our introduction to RM, and later on this year we'll be introducing our advanced resource management course, which we already have great attendance lined up for that one as well. So with that, I'm going to move into 5 ways resource management brings business value. And our membership are largely made up of 4 domains of project-based service delivery organizations and those who serve external clients like professional and consulting services and marketing agencies. On the internal side, those who serve internal clients like enterprise IT and product development organizations. Those 4 domains are largely represent most of our membership today, but essentially if you're in a project-based business, you'll find, hopefully get good value from the things that we do here at the RMI. So with that, I'm going to move into the 5 things. And by the way, at the end of today's broadcast, I'm going to take that question and answers, and we'll go back to the Q&A panel and try to answer as many, if not all, the questions that come in through the panel. So do pay attention. If you got questions as you go, and plug them into the Q&A panel. And I'm not going to try to address those as I go, but I'll try to do them at the end of our session today. So as you know, you step back from resource management discipline, there certainly is a process, and we teach a process solution called just-in-time resourcing. That is, best instantiated when it's supported with a good PSA or PPM tool. But if you step back from all of that, I'll just say that the resource management is one of the most data-intensive business processes I've become familiar with over my 40 years in this business. And if you think about it, service delivery organizations they're human capital intensive. It's, we use people to deliver solutions to our clients, whether they're internal or external. And generally those organizations, the largest portion of their cost is in human capital. So really important that we take the time to focus on this, and in particular get to where we can support fact-based choices around whether it's, who we're going to deploy to a project or how we're going to reprioritize because we have competing priorities or whatever it might be. But this is a real data-based environment, and I'll talk a bit more about this on the next slide. But and then once you've got great data, it allows automation to really accelerate the value you get from resource management. And it helps to, by the way, great data helps you to remove, noise in the system. So if you're, as an example, in enterprise IT, we've all been there where you have competing priorities for limited resources, and you got organizations asking you to start a project, and you're trying to convince them that, we don't have the resources to get that done. And we know that's a struggle. And if you don't have the data to support it, we know where that ends up a lot of times is a squeaky wheel gets the oil, and we end up starting a project that our guts tell us we can't finish, but with data we could substantiate whether we could or we could not. And the same thing's true in a professional consulting services organization or a marketing agency is if you have the facts around, the sales calling the delivery organization, we've got to start this project, and you're trying to sort through resource availability and priorities, having the facts supported by data really makes a huge difference in this environment. So the just-in-time resourcing solution that we teach in our certification program is what's represented here on this page. And in particular, those in blue are the 5 data-intensive just-in-time resourcing elements that make up, if you can't get these 5 elements of data, pretty hard to run good resource management, irrespective of whether or not you're using our methodology or our solution to RM. And so I'll start at the top briefly, just say, good skills inventory about who do you have, where are they located, what do they do, what their capabilities are. A staffing methodology that includes, by the way, where people are currently deployed, what's your backlog look like, and what are those people currently working on, when do they come off those projects, et cetera. Forecasting, usually a big, one of the most difficult areas for organizations is forecasting is data intensive. What does the future look like for us? What projects will we have to do? What skill sets will we need? Where do those people need to be? What competencies do we have to have? Forecasting, pretty important to this, again, very data intensive. Sourcing and development, we teach about how do you look at your go forward picture and fill gaps before you actually have to deploy the people, because we know with human capital, things don't materialize in a matter of hours or days. It usually takes weeks or months to retrain people, to hire people, to engage a vendor, whatever it might be. And so, again, a data intensive element of resource management. And lastly, governance. What are we going to measure? How are we going to measure it? Tracking data, looking both historically, looking forward. Lots of data, really, really important for us relative to running an effective resource management environment. Someone asked me, I'll mention, PPM or PSA. I've used that acronym. If you're not familiar, PSA stands for Professional Services Automation, and PPM for Project and Portfolio Management Tools. Most of the vendors in this space call themselves either a PSA or PPM vendor or tool provider. So anyway, putting these data-intensive elements is really important. Keeping the data accurate and up to date, particularly things like your forecast and your skills inventory, will make your ability to put this data to work for you in a reliable fashion will work a lot better. And then lastly, automation tools. These PSA, PPM tools, today's technology is really terrific. It's getting better every day. And if you have any source of volumes in a decent sized organization, you really need one of these tools to take this process and then really make it sing and with the underlying data that you have. So number two, the value that resource management brings is the ability to better prioritize your project work. So if you're in a PS organization or a marketing agency, we've all been there where you have sales, hey, we've got to get this project to win this deal. We're going to have to be able to start it on this day. We got to get it done by this time, right? So that's the whole idea behind that. And so if you're a marketing or agency or professional services organization, having this data, having a good automation tool to bring that process to life allows you to facilitate a rapid reoptimization, be able to look at the data and have your process and your automation help you with that reprioritization, reoptimization of your resources to maximize revenue that you get from those clients. And by the way, shortening time to staff to improve customer responsiveness is how do you assemble those teams? And by the way, get continuously better, how quickly I can do that. If you're an enterprise IT organization or a product development organization, again, reprioritization is a part of our lives. This happens all the time. And so if you're in product development, as an example, we've had the R&D teams. We know they come in and they've got all these great ideas. We want to bring new products to the marketplace, but we all know that, again, most of the time we're stuck with having to make choices, right? Prioritize our limited resources. And so, a good RM process really allows you to identify where your people are deployed, and by the way, to make sure that they're working on the right things. We all know within, particularly the bigger organizations, sometimes we see resources that have gotten peeled off to go help with somebody's side project or pet project or whatever you want to call that. And are they really working on the things that are most important to the enterprise? And then, by the way, I use the example of enterprise IT, but we've all been there. Do we really have a strong likelihood that we can launch and complete a project in a timely way? And can I support that with data? And a good RM process will bring value by it allows you to make better choices as it relates to project prioritization. Now, this discussion about bringing better business value, I certainly would be remiss if I didn't talk about some of the things we've talked about so much over the last 5 or 6 years. And I'll start with project performance. If you've read, followed us over the last 4 years, been to our certification, of course, read some of our white papers, looked at our market research, 35 to 40% of your projects, according to other organizations like TSIA or the Gartner Group, fail somewhere along the line because either they don't finish on time, they don't finish on budget, they have poor quality, whatever it might be. And most of the time, our own research shows is that the number one reason those projects fail is because I couldn't simply get the right person in the right place with the right skills at the right moment in time. And when we fix that problem, it leads to better business outcomes. And so if you're an externally focused organization, that means more revenue. If you're an internally focused organization like enterprise IT, effective reduction of tech debt are things you can get at, better utilization of your people, That doesn't matter whether you're focused on internal or external customers, is who doesn't need to make better use of their human capital, and of course producing a better customer experience or satisfaction. And there's tons of data that inextricably link better resource management to better outcomes in these areas. Now, if you're wondering, okay, what do I do about that? Well, our most recent survey, again, which was a trending survey, basically showed, what's getting in the way is having dedicated and skilled resource managers is pretty important. The resource management discipline arguably has only been around for 10 to 15 years max, and project management's been around for decades. But this is a relatively nascent discipline that's getting bigger and better. But good skilled resource managers at the moment are hard to come by, and so that's one area. A good process design is really, really important. We run into lots of companies that can explain they've got a good PM process, but if you really have a good, solid, robust, documented resource management process, and then lastly, do you have the right kind of tool to help you do that? And the right kind of tool isn't a spreadsheet any longer. It's a tool that really can take that process I described and bring it to life. Now, I'm not going to go through the details behind these 10 things. There's a real important point of this. Number one is all of you who attend this broadcast can access a copy of the PDF. You can get a copy of this page. The RMI brings through its certification program, through its research, through our various white papers that we produce, is we focus on best practice in this area. It's what we do, and we're good at it. And we do it in a data-based way. And we produce these best practices that you can put to work in your businesses. And I'll highlight these, but you go out to our website, you'll find information about these things. And of course, in our certification program, you can learn all about them in a much more detailed way. But things like centralizing a transparent view to your enterprise, all of your enterprise resources as a best practice, using 2080 as a denominator for utilization. Because we got clear research, and many of you lower that denominator to something else as opposed to using 2080 and variable targets depending on who you're measuring. Will produce very, very different outcomes for the organization. Documenting your RM process and supporting with training. Focusing on metrics that matter. There are certain things to measure that make a big difference here, and some things that don't necessarily do that. Resource management offices like PMOs, where we brought project management together to have commonality of discipline, better standardization. Resource management offices do that for us. I mentioned resource managers. These are people with a special skill set. They need special training, and they can drive toward a better outcome for you. When you pick an automation tool, one of the biggest failures we see in the industry is people thinking the automation tool is going to fix their RM problem. That never works. It's a part of the solution, but without a good, robust process, you won't get where you want to go with RM. Good forecasting, very, very important to this. If you don't have a good view of the future, particularly with human capital, where the ability to acquire and retrain human capital is again done in terms of weeks or months, you've got to get out in front of things. Good skills database, I've mentioned before, is a place where people fail, so you've got to have a good skills database that is adequately maintained. And then last but not least is finding a balance of how I make choices on allocating people to work. So I don't just do it based on economics, that I also focus on doing it based on employee retention and engagement, which brings me to my number 4 point. Good RM enables more engaged employees. And so we put out a white paper series last year. It's a 3-part white paper. You can access it through our white paper, but we did a ton of research in this area, and while there's a lot of reasons why people come and go in our organizations, 2 of those things I'll focus on have to do with people's career aspiration and the goals that they're focusing on, and then therefore how you use a good resource management process to better understand and capture those things, so as we start to allocate people to work, that we do a better job of aligning work not only from what produces better economics for our organizations, but also how to do a better job of being responsive to the needs that our particular customers, employees want relative to their career development and managing work-life balance. Now, there's another 4 things I mentioned there that are out of our research, and you'll see those are pretty common threads for people, other organizations that have done research in this area, but all pretty important. So, and best practice in this area is capturing employee career wants and needs, having a cadence for regular updates, and incorporating that into your allocation priorities and algorithms. So as we deploy people to work, at least at some level, we put a process and an automation tool to work to help us be more responsive to the needs of our employees, thereby improving engagement and employee satisfaction. And the last and the fifth thing about things that good RM will bring to the table to help you get more business value from your investments in this area is building a foundation for strategic labor planning. At our symposium 2 years ago, I had a presentation called the 5 megatrends of resource management. This is one of the 5 I talked about, because as we move towards more data-based resource management, we're getting more and more data that will help us answer the questions on how do we retain the best and brightest, how do we actually lower our hourly cost per person when labor costs as a whole are rising, how do we achieve a more flexible and reliable sourcing of our talent. And these things are all, things working against us are rising labor costs, sourcing complexity, competition, and oh my gosh, the gig economy is here, it's real, it's growing fast. And people, and you just think about that, the ability to deal in that environment is really, really labor-based. And so what we need to do is arm ourselves with accurate, timely data, and then start to think about how we source and deploy labor in a more cost-effective manner. So at a high level, creating a better view of the future, identifying our gaps when we compare supply and demand, analyzing our past use of labor versus the future, creating a reprioritized view of how we might attack that labor need in a different way to lower our costs, become more responsive, improve project performance. These are all things that are data-based, and people are starting to head down this path today, and the tools are getting there. We're seeing more and more applications of the vendors will all come at us with their demonstrations of either current or future use of BI tools, artificial intelligence, but the future is going to be exciting here, and the future belongs to those organizations that get out in front of this thing around strategic labor planning. By the way, that's fed by a good resource management process. Forecasting, I'll nail one more time, is super important. You don't do this well, you won't be good at resource management. And good forecasting is very, very possible, because as we know, HR things happen in cycles of months, not days or weeks. And so we got to get really, really good at that. So before I take some Q&A on those 5 things, and I know we got a bunch of questions in the panel, I'll try to get to them, is one of the questions was, what is RMCP? So I'll just answer that right now. The Resource Management Certified Professional Program. It's been in place now for not quite 6 years. It's the first of its kind certified program to help you learn best practices in resource management. You get, if the graduates get access to a resource toolkit, and you get an opportunity through collaboration with the industry peers, not only in the class that you go to, but following that up in this new community around it. And we've got more than 500 companies now that have put some number of people through this certification program. The program comes in 3 formats. You can either go to a 3-day classroom version, a 6-week 2 hours a week online version with a little bit of homework. We also have it now in on-demand format where you can take it at your leisure, at a time and of your choosing. There's a certification exam at the end of the course, and there's a recertification process for this with the ability to earn these things we call professional credit units along the way to help you with the recertification. And the prices there, in class is $19.95, online is $18.95, and on demand $17.95. And we generally, for the online or in class, provide a early bird discount if you get in early. By the way, if you're a PMP, you get PDUs for attending the RMCP training as well. So it's a nice twofer for those of you who are PMPs. The programs, by the way, if you go to the website, resourcemanagementinstitute.com, you can learn about the next in-class ones are coming up in Cincinnati in August. By the way, we will be following COVID-19 guidelines and providing a safe classroom environment for people who choose to attend the course with us here in Cincinnati. And again, we will continue to monitor those guidelines as we go, but we're anticipating this class will run in a safe manner. And we also have an online class for those of you who prefer that venue or don't want to be in a room full of people given COVID-19 impacts. And We have one starting August 5th, and again, it's 2 hours a week for 6 weeks. And if you want the on-demand version, again, it's available whenever you want it. Just go in and put in your $17.95. You can take the class when you want to do that. I will mention we have an annual event called the Symposium, currently planned for September 24th and 25th in Dallas. You can go to our website and /symposium and see what's on the building agenda. We also have last year's agenda out there. We are monitoring the COVID-19 situation. Our current plan is to run the event, but I will tell you that we are monitoring that very closely to make sure that we can provide a safe environment. And if we cannot, we have backup. We have a backup plan decided for this, and we would announce that if we decide to postpone the event. And as I said, we're monitoring that closely. We'll make a decision at some point if the environment requires us to do that. So, but check out the Symposium, a great event. Last year we had 50-something companies from 11 different countries and 138 attendees. And this coming event, we're looking for something north of that. So rapidly growing. Okay, so as I get ready for the Q&A, I want to just thank again Keaton, Maven Link, and Upland for their sponsorships. Your deck has links to their websites. These are all companies that have clearly been very focused on resource management. They know how important it is to our project-based outcomes, and would encourage you to go learn more about them as you can. So with that, I'm going to move to the Q&A part of this section, Thomas, and I'm just going to roll right into that. And I'll just kind of take these questions as I can. Somebody asked about RMCP, so I believe that I've answered that question. There's a question here. This is a question from a new RM. What do you know now that you wish you knew or practiced more when you started as an RM? That's a terrific question. I would go back to the slide that I pointed out to you earlier that had 10 best practices, and you'll find some of those things that I would talk about are on there. And the first two are pretty simple. Is centralizing a view to resources, pretty important if you're going to be able to do this well. Second thing is measuring and tracking. Everybody wants to know what the outcomes are. Obviously, there's a lot of outcomes you can measure, but utilization is one of them. Use 20/80 as a standard. And then the other thing is that RM, I'll just talk about the soft skills, is RMs are it's a great job, but you're in a tough position. You're dealing with lots of constituencies. Your soft skills and your ability to manage people that are, I'll say, aggressive and, sales coming at you and people wanting to shift projects and move things around. And it's a database environment, and it's, good organizational skills and good soft skills to deal with people. Those are all things that I wish that I probably did a better job at early on relative to this. So anyway, I hope that helps a little bit. Another question was on slide 9, you mentioned forecasting weeks or months. What is an industry best practice for resource forecasting for longer horizons, quarterly, even annually? I just say that I mentioned that HR works in cycles of weeks or months, but good forecasting, we generally tell organizations plan at least 3 months out. 6 months is better, just because of HR cycles. And certainly getting out a year, I'll just say, is more supportive of a budgetary process. But 3 to 6 months is very reasonable. The further you can do with some level of accuracy, the better off you're going to be. So anyway, that helps. Let's see here. Do strong PSA systems meet the requirements for skills database you require? So in short, depends on whose automation tool that you're looking at. Some are better than others, and we have our opinions of what those are. Our parent company, RTM Consulting, has a working group called PS Digital that works with a lot of different software vendors in this space. And we do have some viewpoints there around that. But again, it does come down a lot to what your requirements are and what your particular needs are. But I'd just say all the vendors are, particularly the vendors that are sponsors of the RMI, are paying attention to what we're telling organizations is important to their futures, and they're moving those things into their roadmaps for the products to make them even better. Thomas, we're right about the top of the hour. I know I'm not going to get to the rest of these, so I'm going to pause here and let you pick up from here, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. We are getting questions coming in. We'll look to answer those and send those to you after the presentation, but we had you for 30 minutes, so we want to stick to our allotted time. So again, really want to thank everybody for joining us for today's presentation. I hope you found it valuable. Randy, I appreciate you taking the time today to go through the presentation as well. And just a reminder, our next Power Up is scheduled to be September 2nd. And that one's going to be on working in mixed project methodology environments. So we're really excited about that topic. Again, that will be September 2nd. And keep an eye on your inboxes for that. We'll keep you informed. And before I let everyone go, I want to let you know that we do have a current survey going on now. It's called Agile and Resource Management. We're taking a deep dive into that. We'll keep that survey open for a few more weeks before we pull it and put together our next research report. So I wanted to mention a few of those items before we go. Again, really appreciate everyone spending some time with us today. Randy, thank you as well. And with that, we'll wrap up today's Power Up. Thanks, everyone.